Okay, welcome. We are going to go over 3dsMax daylight rendering for the assignment as a backup for VRA for Rhino. You can see this is Autodesk 3dsMax 2014. There's a Max design. I think it'll be a lighter gray color. They're more or less the same software package. So you can find that under Programs, Autodesk, Program Files, Autodesk, and then 3ds Max 2014 x64 signifies 64-bit. So instead of a file button, they have a button. So it's the same thing, all your typical new, open, save, import will be in here. So I'm going to go ahead and import the Sketchup file. Hit open. Go ahead, leave the defaults, hit OK, and hit yes here. It's coming in with a daylight system from Sketchup, which I will delete just to cleanse and give one that's from this version of 3dsMax for a little more reliability. You never know. There's a difference. Alright, so one of the main differences here, you've got your basic viewports, similar to what you see in Rhino. If you click and hold the middle mouse button, you can pan in all the viewports. If you roll it, you can zoom. The Z key is a shortcut for zooming to a selected object. So I'm selecting a couple objects and hitting Z. And then rolling out with the middle mouse roll. If you hold the Alt key down in the perspective viewport and click the middle mouse button instead of panning, it will orbit the viewport for you. So that's the basic moves. You can combine the control with the Alt key for rotating with control to zoom in without using the scrolling the middle mouse button, and then let go both to pan. So what we want to do, I'm going to go ahead and over here is your kind of main menu that you'll use to create, modify, and change some other things. I'm going to go to display here and switch and turn off or hide cameras and lights. That'll get rid of that, and then helpers will get rid of the compass. So go ahead and maybe leave that light. I'm going to go ahead and delete that daylight system. So this is the base geometry. All those other camera objects from the Sketchup file are hidden right now, just to get us back to a base and allow us to select a few objects. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that mental ray is our renderer. So the way you do that, there's three buttons up here. These are that's your render button, similar to the R in V-Ray. This is just going to show the frame buffer, what's been rendered. Turn it on and off that way, and then this will let you change the settings. So I click on that, it pops up this window, and you can see I can change different radio buttons. I want a single image, but if I'm in gray space, it shows this little hand, and I can kind of left click and push, and it will move that menu up. You can also grab this black bar on the right hand side and scroll up and down in this menu. This is where you'll change the values of your pixels for rendering. You'll have to do that for the assignment. And then at the bottom is where you can assign a renderer. So I'm going to click on that. It's going to expand out. And click this dot 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 to change from the default scanline renderer to the mental ray renderer. Hit OK. So with that done, we can close this menu out. You can always get back to it here. The next thing we'll do is go ahead and set a couple materials up. If you click on this button next to its material editor, you can also hit the M key to bring it up. What I'm going to do here is switch back. I think if you open the material editor up before changing it, it'll open the Slate material editor. This is a newer version that has some properties for some really more advanced things we won't be using here, so we will switch it back to the compact material editor. Most of the tutorials you'll find out there on materials are down in this editor. Next step would be to go ahead, and we've got a standard gray color. You can see there's a couple palettes here. Yours might actually be set up with less, probably the 3x2 slots, so you just might have a couple slots like this. We don't have a lot of materials, so we can leave it as is. This is like a painter's palette. So you squeeze out a bunch of tubes of color, these all being gray, and haven't been applied to the scene yet. What we can do is go and create, with this create tab, a plane. And you can see that goes blue. That means it's active, waiting for me to finish the command. I'm zooming and panning right now. I'm going to click, left click, and drag to create a plane. Most of these objects have really nice right click menus, so if I right click over that, I can switch to move, rotate, scale, a bunch of other hiding and unhiding. So I'm going to move this, and it has a gizmo that's very similar to the gumball in Rhino that will let you constrain moving up, left, or right, or within a plane, or constrained by individual axis. So I'm just going to move that plane up so it's underneath the first stair, and we don't have a unnecessary riser height for that first step from the ground. So you can see this object is colored. There's not layers as heavily used as you see in Rhino. Everything's an object, and you can select objects by hitting the H button or this button here to select particular objects in the scene. So you can see I've got a plane. There are a bunch of other group name objects. It's kind of messy, not exactly what I would look for. But what I want to do is select a piece of that glass and get the material off of it. So it looks like I selected a piece of glass. Indeed I did, so I can undo that. I just moved it up real quick to make sure that was the glass. I can try to select similar objects. Let's see, under edit, select similar, and see if I do get all those panes of glass. We'll try to organize similar objects, maybe based on the material here. So what I can do is try to group that to an easier selectable object as glass. It's similar to using a layer. So when I hit H or select by name from the scene, I should see the glass object in the group name, which I'm actually not showing right now. So here's filters. This is show everything. So there's my glass group. I can select the invert of that and hit OK, and that should be all my geometry in the plane, which I don't really want to add to the selection yet. So removing from a selection is going to be Alt, and adding is going to be Control in 3D Studio Max to combine those, and then I can group that to be building. So now I should have a plane, glass, and building as objects that I can assign materials to. The building I'll go ahead and leave. This is kind of like the diffuse color picker, a white color, and assign to that object. Select the plane, pick a new, maybe give it a grayer color, and assign it to that object. And then the glass, what I want to do, just double click that, that'll just give you a preview like it does in V-Ray when you hit preview. I want to load a material from an Autodesk library, material library. So these materials are just standard materials. You can see this big button here. I'm going to switch and click on that standard button and pull up the browser. There's the scrolling bar here, and you can see you have a whole lot of pre-built options in this library. Under glass, I'll just pick a clear glass. You can see there's a lot of options under there as well. So double click, we'll load it up, and then assign to my material selection. So we've got our V-Ray set to render, or not V-Ray, but mental ray set to be the renderer. If we render right now, there's no lights in the scene. It will kind of just give you a flat gray scene. There's a couple options for rendering. What we're doing now is a daylight render, so I'm going to go to the Create tab where we picked geometry of that plane. I'm going to go to these other buttons. There's Shapes, Lights, Cameras. I'm going to go to Systems where I can find a daylight system. It's blue, highlighted blue, so that means it's active and waiting for me. I'm going to click a couple times, and let me start displaying these cameras. So what that created was this compass rose that tells me my direction. North, I can rotate that if north is a little bit at an angle, and the sun should change accordingly to kind of link to one another. And then there's this daylight system object that's tied to that compass rose. What we need to do is, under the typical create where we created it, we need to modify this daylight system here. So if I have this plane selected, the Modify tab will show the parameters of that plane. And I can try to standardize things. Right-clicking zeroes out on these spinners, zeroes things out. It's kind of a nice trick later on. But I made it a clean 500 by 500 feet and remove the unnecessary segments. So there's the plane. If I click on the daylight system, I've got a lot of properties. And again, dead gray space will let you pan, or grab this black bar to scroll down. You can see there's a lot of settings in there. The main ones we have to change are changing the sunlight and the skylight to mental rays, sun, and sky. And then when you add the sky, it's going to want to put it as the environment map, similar to what we did linking the sun to the environment in the background with the text sky and V-Ray for Rhino. So just hit yes. At that point, I'm kind of high noon. I sort of mentioned that's not the best way to get good lighting in a scene. So I'm going to hit the setup button on the daylight, and this takes me back to where I can change the time and location. And switch it to turn on daylight saving time. And if I hit this render button, top right teapot, we should see something similar to what we saw coming out of V-Ray for Rhino as far as quality of shadows, coloring of shadows, reflective nature of glass. So what you're looking for in any of these exposures is sort of whites, nothing too blasted out, and white and overpowering, and kind of dark shadows in the darkest areas. So the exposure is not the best, and it's because we're not using mental rays photographic exposure. So where you change that is under rendering environment. You can hit the 8 key to pull this up as well. So this is, you can see where that mental ray sky went into the environment map. If I scroll down, there's exposure control, and the first OK when I imported the daylight system asked me to set this up. We will change this drop down to the MR photographic exposure control, which is mental rays photographic exposure control, which does a little bit better as far as giving you control as shutter speed, aperture, similar to V-Ray's camera. So there's some presets out here, daylight, and then you can actually, if it's too bright, you can increase this number to be a faster shutter speed and less light. If you are too dark, you can, or too light, you can increase it, and if you're too dark, you can decrease it to get different exposures. So if we did indoors, I'd want maybe the 256. That's half of the time. The other one, I'm going to go ahead and zoom. And then change my camera to be inside. So what we can do, if we kind of like this view, we can actually save it. And I'm going to switch this just because it's slowing down to wireframe. But I can create a camera from the view. And it should put a camera in there, where close to where I was, and then I can kind of continue to edit it. If I right click on it, I can get the target and move that out. And then I can make it, since it is interior, through the Modify tab, change the lens to be 20 millimeters, which is more of a wide angle lens. And try to get a good shot on the inside. Okay, this is essentially what I'm asking you to do, is create a few camera views, set them up in render. You want to adjust the exposure for each rendering, and just the basic composition. The next assignment, you'll be compositing in a foreground and a background element from your own photographs or ones you find online. With that, I'm going to go ahead and pause this so you don't have to wait for it to render. how long it took down here. It took 1 minute and 41 seconds. Also got ability to use alpha channels. This will allow you to composite a lot easier. Sometimes you want to render the same view with the ground plane. You can slide in a background image using this alpha channel here. And then also maybe turn off the ground plane if you want to composite other things in the foreground a little easier. It'll kind of give you an outline that you can slide in grass or other elements in the foreground. With that, we'll go ahead and move on and cover the rest in class. Thanks.